Good morning once again, and welcome to Homecoming Weekend as we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the enrollment of the first class of women at Providence College. Please take a moment to locate the nearest emergency exit. In the unlikely event of an issue that requires building evacuation, please follow the instructions of staff members and exit in an orderly manner. Now please welcome this morning's MC, Providence College Executive Vice President Ann Manchester-Molak.
Thank you. Thank you all and good morning. What a great, great day to be a friar, right, Bob? You know, we've had this first weekend of October circled on our calendars for all too long. Seems like it's been forever. The opportunity to bring students, parents, faculty, staff, alumni, and all of our friends all back together to celebrate Providence College has been a real long time coming. But we're here now, and it is great to see so many people on campus, all of us united by our connections to this great institution. I'd like to give a special welcome to all the women here with us this morning. As you know, and was reflected here, so as you know, all of this year we'll be celebrating the 50th anniversary of the enrollment of women at PC. We'll be celebrating that with a series of events and activities called Then, Now, and Next. We honor our heritage, we celebrate our successes, and we look forward with great anticipation for the things to come. A round of applause, please, for all the women in our audience. Okay, so we don't want to forget our male friars here. So, of course, as is typical of any homecoming weekend, we have many, many activities scheduled over the next day and a half. We started earlier with the Friar 5K and many other activities. In fact, the Friar 5K delayed me by about 20 minutes because I couldn't get through the front gate. Other activities that will continue well into the evening with a special water fire that happens in downtown Providence right after sunset. And it's become a Providence College tradition. We did it for the 100th anniversary, the centennial, and we're doing it now to commemorate, to mark the anniversary of women, the inauguration of Father Kenneth Sicard as our 13th president, which occurred yesterday. And we're also honoring the fact that it is an opportunity for the class of 2020 to finally get together and have the long-awaited commencement that they so deserve. Along the way, we will connect with old friends. We're going to meet some new ones, hopefully, and we share in the fellowship that is part of what makes Providence College a special place. We also hope you will take advantage of some of the educational and spiritual enrichment opportunities we have offered for the weekend, and especially for our students, that students have a chance to enjoy free time with their families. We've packed a lot into today, and we're glad you are here to be part of it, but let's begin formally with a prayer, and I invite Father Justin Bolger, the chaplain of Providence College, to say a prayer with us.
Let's begin in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. God of all truth, we praise you for your goodness. We thank you for your many blessings, especially the gift of Providence College, this beautiful day, and these our friends and family. Bless us as we gather here. May this coming home be a time of true recreation. May we be strengthened in mind and heart to pursue the truth, to pursue what you inspire in us, and follow where you lead us. We ask all this through Christ our Lord. Amen. And may Almighty God bless you, the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you, Father Bolger. Stephanie O'Brien is president of the National Alumni Association, the group that represents PC's extraordinary community of more than 57,000 alumni. Ms. O'Brien represents the middle generation in a three-generation friar family, one of those legacy traditions so common among our alumni. She's a professional educator who lives in Hingham, Massachusetts, and she's been a wonderful representative of Providence College. Stephanie? Yes.
Thank you, Ann. It is a true pleasure to be here with all of you today. It's stunning out, so it just couldn't be more perfect. So thank you all for having me. As Ann mentioned, my friar ties do run deep. And I will say my dad came here class of 59, and I remember I was probably 10-ish when he told me that the college was going co-ed, because before that, I didn't even think I would be able to come here. So he was more, and he's still more than thrilled that I came here. My son and my daughter are among alumni. So I am honored to be representing the 57,000 alumni across the country and abroad. And I could not be more proud that this is the year that we are celebrating 50 years of women on campus. This has been a difficult year and a half, as we all know, so we haven't had a chance to see each other. And the one thing I am so impressed by the college is the ability to pivot and come up with ways that we have virtually been able to stay in contact with each other. In particular, Friar Ties was a wonderful venue to get to know more about the college. Almost a silver lining. I don't know if you've had a chance, but definitely something that will be continued, and I hope that you have a chance to participate. So, alumni, I do want to thank you all for coming back and for celebrating in person. As the year goes on, I also ask that you support our 24 regional alumni clubs across the country by volunteering or participating in the virtual or in-person events. I know that you are going to enjoy what the clubs have to offer. And as I said, I do encourage you to participate in the virtual Friar Ties programs or coming back to any of the events here, in particular our varsity athletics, which you can finally attend together again. Go Friars. So, to parents and guardians in the room, I can remember clearly sitting where you are and wanting to make sure that my students had the best experience possible. Please know they are in great hands. Our alumni network is here for them while they are students and, of course, when they become graduates. Whether it's needing local recommendations or a connection for an internship, our alumni are here for our students. They can find us on Friar Link, LinkedIn, or at any of the Friar networking events. Students, no matter what year you are, enjoy every moment and embrace every opportunity. I hope that you'll take time to learn about the strength of the alumni network. Just looking around the campus, you can physically see the impact of our alumni support. know that the alumni are here for you every step of the way, because you will be forever a Friar. My best wishes for everyone during this weekend with your Friar family, and go Friars!
Great job, Stephanie. Thank you. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Senior Class President Eliana DaCunha. She's distinguished among our students by her excellent work in the classroom, her leadership in the student community, and her commitment to meaningful service in the community. She's a double major in biology and global health, a degree program she designed herself through the college's individualized major program. She is a native of Fairhaven, Massachusetts. In addition to her class of 22 leadership role, she is president of PC's Doctors Without Borders student chapter. It's a chapter that she founded last semester on her own. Eliana also volunteers along with other PC pre-med students at the Hope Clinic, which is a free clinic for the uninsured in Providence. And she applies her interest, energy, passion, and expertise to help Providence College navigate COVID-19. She's the student representative on PC's Continuity Task Force, the virus control group that's been working so diligently since since April of. To say that she's making the most of her college experience would certainly be an understatement at this point. Please help me welcome Eliana DaCunha.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Molak. Just looking for my speech real quick. So good morning, Friartown. It is my honor and privilege to be celebrating homecoming weekend with you and your families. I'm so grateful to see all your faces in person. It's been a tough year and a half, but it has made moments like this all the more special. I just want to take the time to thank everyone at PC who has played a role in adapting our college experience during the pandemic. As you all know, an enormous amount of resources, money, time, and energy has gone into ensuring that our campus community has been safe. As a student representative on the college's virus control subgroup, I saw firsthand the unflagging dedication of PC's faculty and staff to protecting our Friar family. Running a college sounds difficult already, but running a college during COVID times, that takes a special kind of heart and leadership. That is why I, on behalf of the entire student body, would also like to express deep gratitude to our president, Father Sicard. He's demonstrated such immense love, commitment, and resilience as he helped the college navigate the incredible challenges of COVID-19. PC has been fortunate enough to have Father Sicard for some time now. Before earning his PhD in business from Ohio State University in 1997, he received both his bachelor's degree in accounting and master's in business administration from Providence College. He was later hired by Fleet Financial Group in Providence in 1978, and by 1990, he was ordained into the priesthood. Father Sicard later returned to PC to serve as the Dean of Residence Life from 1997 to 2005. In this position, he oversaw the supervision and security of residence halls, the department's operating budget, the hiring and supervision of more than 100 staff, and the creation of policies that ensured a quality life for students consistent with the college's mission. In 2005, he was appointed College Executive Vice President and Treasurer by Father Brian Shanley, who took office at as PC's 12th president. In that role, Father Sicard directly supervised many college operations, including athletics, student affairs, mission and ministry, external affairs and marketing, human resources, and public safety. Now we are lucky to have him as our president. Please join me in welcoming Father Kenneth Sicard.
Students like you make this ministry such a joy, so thank you. On behalf of the college community, I just want to tell you how wonderful it is to be hosting homecoming again after a one-year hiatus. This is a reminder that we're gradually getting back to normal. Despite all the lingering challenges and frustrations, Friar spirit is alive and well. Our classrooms are full of engaged professors and students. Activities are bringing our students together for all kinds of healthy and productive endeavors. And the day-to-day life of Providence College is in the most important ways as positive, as good as it was before the pandemic. I'm so grateful to everybody in our community, but especially to our students for staying positive as we continue to work through this. Life isn't perfect, but it's pretty good. We can find joy and happiness, but in these times, you just have to look a little bit harder to find it. But I have a great sense of optimism in the collective attitude of the community, and that is why we continue to thrive. And there are real markers of progress that we can point to. I am so excited about the progress of construction in our science complex, where laboratories are being renovated and other facilities updated. This has been a multi-year project by design, and this is a stage that is critically important to our students and faculty. As you may know, it follows very significant academic facilities upgrades affecting our humanities and our business programs, all within the past 8 years. Great infrastructure supports the incredible work of our faculty, and these improvements are having an impact that affects every one of our students in a very positive way. And we got some great news during the summer when Providence College was awarded a chapter of Phi Beta Kappa, the nation's most prestigious liberal arts honor society. This places PC in select company, and it's a great reflection of the exceptional quality of our overall academic program. There are only 290 institutions with this privilege. That's less than 10% of American colleges. And just a few days ago, we learned that PC is ranked #1 once again in its U.S. News and World Report category with special recognition for undergraduate teaching. This kind of endorsement is both welcome and gratifying. And we began this new academic year with a terrific class, the class of 2025, and a group of new dynamic faculty across several disciplines. We're excited about both groups and mindful of the challenges that they had to overcome to become part of the Friar family while dealing with pandemic-related restrictions and complications. We continue to add more Dominican friars to our faculty and administrative roles at Providence College. And it's really interesting, the number of men choosing the Dominican order continues to be at all-time highs, and Providence College benefits in so many ways. These new young friars contribute greatly to our academic program, and they infuse our faith community with enthusiasm and ideas. We are so lucky to have them, and they give us confidence that the future of the Dominican presence at Providence College is secure. And this has all happened because PC has a strategic vision rooted in its sacred mission and ideals. We enjoy the support of our alumni and other friends who believe in the college and its future and who invest in our aspirations. We have faculty members who inspire us and students who challenge us. That's the formula that helps us sustain this momentum. And this recent progress, especially over the past 10 years, has changed PC's trajectory. With God's grace, the potential for the future is virtually unlimited. It's important for us always to keep at the forefront our commitment to those values that I mentioned a moment ago and the heritage forged over 104 years. PC remains fundamentally the same place it has always been. We have strong academics rooted in the liberal arts. We are an affirming community of people who look out for each other even after graduation. We're true to our mission, and we remain rooted in our Catholic and Dominican traditions. We're motivated and optimistic. We are truly an ascendant institution with a bright future, and I am so grateful that each of you is with us as part of the Fryer family. And it's now my honor to introduce this morning's keynote presentation. Today, as we celebrate homecoming weekends, and in particular, the 50th anniversary of women at Providence College, I am immensely pleased to introduce someone who epitomizes the mission of our institution and whose accomplishments and achievements underscore the desire for academic excellence here at Providence College. Dr. Mae Jemison, an astronaut, physician, scientist, educator, and author, is a strong proponent of the humanities and their compatibility with the physical sciences. She served 6 years as a NASA astronaut and became the first woman of color in space. But some highlights of her career, both before and after going into space, reveal a much fuller picture of this amazing woman. Dr. Jemison is a graduate of Stanford University with degrees in chemical engineering, as well as African and African American studies. She earned her medical degree from Cornell Medical School, which included study and work in Cuba, Thailand, and East Africa. After graduation, she served with the Peace Corps in Liberia and Sierra Leone and was responsible for the health of Peace Corps volunteers in those two countries. When Dr. Jemison returned to the States, she was inspired to apply to NASA to become an astronaut. And that dream was fulfilled when she blasted off aboard the Space Shuttle Endeavour in September 1992. After her NASA career, Dr. Jemison founded a technology consulting firm which focused on integrating critical socio-cultural issues into the design of engineering and science projects, such as satellite technology for healthcare delivery in developing countries. In 1994, Dr. Jemison founded the international science camp, The Earth We Share, for 12 to 16-year-old students from around the world, a program of the nonprofit Dorothy Jemison Foundation for Excellence, named for her mother. Camps have been held at several locations across the United States, as well as internationally. She now leads 100-Year Starship, a bold, far-reaching nonprofit initiative to assure the capabilities exist for human travel beyond our solar system to another star within the next 100 years. She is building a multifaceted global community to foster the cultural, scientific, social, and technical commitment, support, and financial framework to accomplish the 100-Year Starship vision. Today's presentation will take the form of a discussion involving Dr. Jemison, Ann Manchester-Molak, and Eliana DaCunha. Please welcome Dr. Jemison to the stage.
Already taking over, so that's good. I love it.
That way I don't have to look back and forth. I can just look and see you there.
It's so good to see you today. Do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So Dr. Jemison, thank you so much for being here. We had hoped to have Dr. Jemison here for the 2020 commencement. She was very flexible and pivoted 3 times with us in order to get her here in Providence. We had to cancel, as you know, commencement 2020. We rescheduled for October. We canceled that. She's been wonderful, and we're just delighted that you're finally here with us. So as we look at the fabric of Providence College as a primarily undergraduate institution, just curious if you would talk a little bit about your perspective, your view of the humanities and the role that the humanities may play in terms of the career path that you've taken and how important that might be?
So I find it absolutely impossible to separate who people are from the science and the technology that they do. They're inseparable. The reason why is because science is really just understanding, or search for understanding, and technology is putting that understanding into some practical use. And the uses you choose depend on who you are, right? It depends on your ambitions, right? It depends on your perspective. Are you fearful, right? What you're afraid of. Are you hopeful? Do you explore? All of those things depend on what you want to do, and that's how you design your technology, based on those. So you can use a certain combination of minerals to propel a bullet or to create a beautiful fireworks display. Same thing, but it depends on your perspective, what you do with it. So I find it absolutely impossible to separate them out in the greater world. Now, you can do the disciplines and you can go deep, right, in those disciplines. Everybody doesn't have to have the same level of acumen in them, but I think it's critical that you study and you understand, particularly in college and higher education, but I think through all education, that you understand this integration, that you have a good introduction to the humanities, right? That you have a good introduction to the sciences, even if you're a social science major or a humanities major. Notice how social science is in there. And I can tell you that I sort of came by that. I have to say my mother did not allow me to get away with being just in science. My mother was a school teacher in the Chicago Public Schools for 25 years. She had majored in English in college. She made me and my brother and sister read all kinds of things, and at the time, I was just huge into reading science fiction books and things like that in high school. She's like, okay, that's it. And even though we can talk about science fiction later, but she gave me the book The Dahomean by Frank Yerby, which was about a Dahomean prince who was captured into slavery in the US and what happened to him, and the story went back and forth. And it sort of captured me. And so then she just sort of insisted that I read other things. And it sort of brought it together. So I think those things are really important. And I'm going to finish up, but one of the most important events I had in college, and I'll tell you how I majored in African and African American studies later, but one of the most important events I had was something called a Values, Technology, and Society course, the engineering school at Stanford. I think this was the first year or the second year that they required you to take these classes, and you had to take 2 of them. I was already well on my way and done a lot of political science. I took them my senior year. And it was really about how society affects, you know, science and vice versa. Interesting, I had some serious disagreements with the engineering professor, and even though I did really well in political science classes and things like that, he didn't necessarily like my take on how those two impacted one another. I had better luck with a psychiatrist that I was taking a VTS course from, so it was really very interesting. But those things made a really big difference in cementing my belief that they're critically important.
And your career path has been just marvelous in terms of how you've been able to take some of your different perspectives and knowledge and firsthand ability to see what's happening in third world countries and so forth. And how did you find that intersect with some of the capabilities that you had in terms of making sure that you were kind of breaking the glass ceiling in a couple of different ways? You're coming into it from a different perspective, from the science related, which has been dominated by a lot of gentlemen, right? Did you find that difficult at all?
So in terms of developing countries are going in the
Anything like that?
sciences?
Both, actually.
Oh.
Yeah. A little curveball here.
So I think you should take any experience you have and be conscious of it and integrate it into what you're doing. So you take those perspectives with you. And again, I have to give my parents credit. I'll give myself credit for choosing my parents well. But the whole thing about saying being observant, my mother was one of these people like, you should be observant, you should understand that other people have perspectives and be able to connect to their perspectives, not to be afraid of being empathic and having that connectivity. So that was really important. My father was a little bit more direct in that you need to know what other people are thinking, right? And you need to pay attention and having, you know, that level of confidence in yourself. So how that impacted me was to understand that, you know, when you're designing something, when you want to design something, you want people to use it, then you have to understand what their circumstances are, what they want. You know, you sort of drop something in without having consulting them, they may not use it, and there's so many cases of quote unquote tech developed for developing countries that didn't work and didn't last because people didn't want it. You know, if you're used to cooking with a 3-stone fire and somebody gives you a solar cooker that's the equivalent of a crock pot, what's that, right? And then everybody's like, they just didn't know how to use it. No, they didn't want to use it. And they didn't intend to use it because it was a whole big cultural change that you did not take into account. In terms of going into the sciences, I think every kid likes the sciences, right? We come out of the chute excited about the world around us. We're picking up the bugs, the snails, the linen, the couch. We don't know, we're not supposed to touch the ground. We're asking what this is. We're always experimenting. Doesn't necessarily mean that you want to go into the physical sciences, but we're curious about them. I think a lot of what happens in school is, in many ways, we beat that curiosity out of them. And we do that not only in the sciences, but in a lot of other areas too. The way I got through is I had science projects. So I was a third of 3 children. So I had a lot of, I could watch what my brother and sister did. So I learned, I paid attention to, anyway. So I did lots of science projects, that was part of it, but I did lots of other things, from dance to studio art and all of those things, and it's all part of life and growing up. How did I get the, all throughout grade school and high school, my teachers were very excited about my intellect and what I could do. And so there was an encouragement. Getting to college is a little bit different. For the first time, I ran into professors who were not so thrilled about my intellect, and it didn't matter that I'd done really well on standardized tests and all of that, and so that was the first time that I had that, like, niggling, like, what's going on here? But this is where hanging out with my father and his friends, and my mother too was pretty feisty, came in. It's like I wasn't gonna leave. It didn't matter. I wasn't gonna leave. Every year, they're graduating thousands of people in engineering. So why couldn't I? And if they had never graduated an engineer, why couldn't I? And the other piece was, this is where I probably ended up being an African studies major. So I started taking a lot of classes in Swahili, in African languages, other things, performing arts. And they made me happy. And so I think there was almost this counterbalance, you know, this balance between maybe there are places that people weren't excited about you, and then you had places where they were and liked your intellect. And so it sort of balanced out. And that's not to say that I didn't have really incredible professors in the sciences and in engineering who were really thrilled about me. But it was the first time I ran into this whole issue with the intellect stuff.
It sounds
And
like
I didn't care.
you handled it extremely well.
Yeah, just to branch off of that, I have a question about women in STEM. And by the way, it's such an honor to talk to you. You're like one of my inspirations growing up, so this is so cool. As I mentioned before, I'm a double major in biology and global health, hoping to pursue medical school after graduation. And PC has definitely done a lot to support me on my path and has invested heavily into new science programs, facilities, and faculty. And so the science majors have always been really popular here. However, we're seeing more young women looking to major in these programs. So could you give us your thoughts on the role of women in STEM disciplines and some advice for students looking to pursue STEM careers?
So when you say the role of women in STEM, I'm not really sure how to put that, except for we can have any role we want, right? There is not any particular place you have to be. One could talk about the impact of women in STEM. In so many ways, it's again about bringing other perspectives. It's about many times creating a fuller solution. When you look at women in a lot of STEM fields, their papers, when they may publish less, but when they publish, their papers are quoted more frequently. They're usually bigger, omnibus kinds of papers and solutions. But beyond that, I would also remind us that women have been involved in science, or what we call STEM, forever. Sometimes they did it under other folks' names, right? But we have to remember that, because sometimes we think, oh no, we weren't there because that history wasn't shown. So we know that the Harvard Astronomy Department in the 1900s, early 1900s, all the people who were doing most of the work on stars and recording where they were, and who actually came up with the whole idea of how to tell the distance that a star was from the Earth, were women, because women, quote unquote, they could pay them less even though they were mathematicians. Yeah, so they were the ones who were doing the star chart. So it's really important for us to recognize that, and I always bring that up because it almost feels as though we're being upstarts. How come you want to go into this now? And you all want to, you know, we've been doing it all the time, right? We go from Ada and languages and all that. I mean, computer languages and other things. So it really, so we can have whatever role we want. The impact we have is outsized. In terms of how do you get through? Just first of all, know you have the right to be there, period. You don't have to ask anybody's permission. You have the right to be there. You don't have to wait for somebody to sort of say, okay. What I would say as well, though, is that you'll run into lots of nonsense. It's interesting that women actually in the life sciences actually graduate in higher numbers in the life sciences, but as you go up into advancing authority in the life sciences, then women's percentage, even though they have a higher percentage of the degrees, their percentage in leadership positions starts to dwindle and become less than men. People used to say, oh, it's because we haven't been around enough. Yeah, we have. But there is this mentality, this ideas, these thoughts. Interestingly enough, and it may have changed, I haven't looked at the stats recently, but the engineering has stayed kind of flat, and computer science sort of decreased a little bit from when I was in college. So that doesn't show necessarily that people don't want to do it. It probably shows some just very difficult perspectives of the people who are in those fields and how difficult they make it, because women exit the science fields a lot. And particularly out of the engineering and the computer sciences, they exit a lot, or they exit into other areas where they're not doing the research, they're not doing the design or the technology. Let me get this back to another place though. But what does that mean? It means that we do have to support and make people aware of these things. So frequently, and now I'm just gonna add a nerd to say this. So many times people who are in the sciences think that the sciences and their promotion in it are completely objective, right? They say it's a meritocracy. Just pure clean meritocracy. Nobody, did anything for me. But no, when you do apprenticeships, somebody is doing something for you and getting you in a position. When folks bring you into their lab and work with you, they're putting you in a position to do better. There's so much research that shows that, that those kinds of positions are very often offered to male students in undergraduate, and it perpetuates itself throughout their career, because you can imagine that the step up you get by working in labs. Right, by working in a lab. So there is a difference. And a lot of this information I got as I headed up a committee for the National Academy of Sciences that was looking at, impactful for solutions for women in STEM. But when you started to unpack all the reasons the solutions weren't working, it had to do with what was happening as you were going through the STEM fields, and it never stopped.
That's interesting.
the infrastructure there was not there.
Not just the infrastructure, but what do you call the milieu, the environment that you work in?
Yeah.
It's more than the infrastructure. It's the fabric
culture, yeah.
and the culture. But we have a right to change that, and it's simple, but it's hard, which is just realizing you have the right to be there. You don't have to have anyone's permission per se to have the interest in these things.
Yeah, no, thank you so much.
I mean, there's some strategies we could talk about too, but I think the main one is to know you have the right to be there. And I would just do one other: don't lose your smile.
Thank you.
Yeah, don't lose it. You have to keep it because that's your joy. And take your joy with you.
Yeah. And I'll just point out, I have a really good role model out there in the audience is my mom. She's a primary care physician.
Wow.
So
Hi,
it's
Mom.
really cool to see. And my dad also, he's a chiropractor, but since we're
Hi,
talking
Dad.
women, yes, they've been really amazing role models for me too. And the primary reason I want to go into medicine. So it's very cool to hear from you and from them and just to see how you can use science for good. And yeah, so.
You went from chemical engineering at Stanford to Cornell Medical School. Can you talk a little bit about that shift in your education?
So it really wasn't a shift. It was part of a plan. I wanted to do biomedical engineering. And believe it or not, this was before biomedical engineering was a thing, right? Before it was a formalized major. And so when I was at Stanford, I wanted to do organ design and things like that. And I was steered toward one professor in the chemical engineering department who was doing blood work and things like that. He said, I could do an interdisciplinary degree, call it biomedical engineering, but no one would know what kind of engineering I knew. And this is a long time ago, so the courses weren't formalized, so he suggested I be a chemical engineer. And then I could go on and do a master's, and then it's okay to start doing the biomedical engineering and putting together a PhD program in it. And while I was going through college, I ran into a number of doctors who said, this was during the hardcore pre-med time, and they said that docs are kind of difficult people to get along with, and if at some point in time you think you might want to run certain types of research projects, you might need to have an MD, or it would be helpful to do it. So knowing my personality, I said, okay, I need to get an MD. And so I decided to go to medical school. I had enough, of the different classes. So I literally took the MCATs my junior year when I made the decision, and my junior year when I made the decision. And that's how I ended up going to medical school. And my full intent was to finish medical school and then go back and do a PhD in biomedical engineering. Now, my sister's an MD, and she had gone to school before me. In fact, she was in the first class of women at Wesleyan, which was 51 years ago. But so I figured out how to get into medical school, all that kind of stuff. But then I didn't really realize that you had to have an internship and all this other stuff afterwards to get a license and pay off the loans. So that was one piece where I continued on, but it wasn't a change. It was really to be able to do biomedical engineering. And then I learned a lot of other things as I was there.
Just to get into the topic of global health a little bit, because we share that interest. So many of our students either study or do volunteer work abroad. How did your volunteer work with the Peace Corps and flying doctors in Africa and other developing countries impact your career path?
So I should say, first of all, I was not a volunteer in Sierra Leone. I was the area medical officer. So as you heard, I was responsible for the health care for the Peace Corps volunteers and the State Department personnel in Sierra Leone and the volunteers in Liberia. And I make that difference because volunteers are really special people, right? And I don't want to take their thunder. The volunteers are really special people. And what I learned about the volunteers and being with the Peace Corps, my job as area medical officer was one of the most incredible jobs I had. And I went there, I wanted to do that because I had had the opportunity while I was in medical school to go to a number of different countries and work in healthcare in very difficult settings, from working in a Cambodian refugee camp in Thailand to working with the Flying Doctors in East Africa. And I found out I really loved medicine in developing countries because you had to use your laboratory skills, right? So nobody else was doing your lab, so you had to, and medicine is a little bit different now, but you had to do your own gram stains, you had to look at the microscope and identify the parasites and stuff. It was like really cool, so that's my science part. And then you also had to understand the circumstances, because what happened to people in terms of their nutritional status, in terms of what conditions they were living in, was really critical for you trying to figure out how to take care of them, because you couldn't just grab everybody, put them in a hospital. You had to deal with them where they were, and very frequently they weren't in the kinds of circumstances we're in. So it really pushed on all of those pieces, so I just absolutely loved it. And so when I found that out, I decided I wanted to do more, and so I set myself up to have to do it. I decided I wasn't gonna do a full residency after I did an internship. And you know, when you do match day and for people in medicine and stuff like that, you have to figure out what you're gonna do. I was called down to the dean's office of the Cornell saying, what are you doing? Right, you can't do that. And if I knew that if I had everything plotted out, then I would never go back overseas. I would never take that time to take a year, and it's 2.5 years, to just completely immerse myself. What did that mean to me? Is that has probably been one of the things that's informed me more than anything else about what the world is like. Because when I landed in Freetown, within the first 2 weeks, I had to call a military medical evacuation for someone. I had to stock my own labs. I had to do so many things. I had to deal with anything that came up in a medical context, from rape to full-blown schistosomiasis to car accidents to mental health issues. And you're doing it in a setting where you're working with limited resources, but you have to have a good outcome. And then it helped me to appreciate the difference in the resources. It was easier for me to call Paris from Freetown than it was for me to call Kinema or you know, a city up country in Sierra Leone. So that helped to galvanize me. And so that helped me also to understand that, again, the technology and how we deploy them depends on the circumstances. So I actually had thought that what I was gonna do when I went over to Sierra Leone was just gonna be a one-off, right? In 2.5 years, nobody was gonna pay attention to it, wasn't gonna be helpful. It wasn't the case. It seems like when I came back and I applied for NASA, that was one of the cool things. They liked having you been in a position where you had to be responsible and in an operational position. But what it also helped me to inform is what I did work with NASA, because in extreme environments, how do you look at the world differently? How do you use satellite technologies in different ways? You know, how do you use remote sensing, other things? So it helped inform me. And again, that's about bringing your perspective and then knowing that there's something that you can contribute as you integrate these ideas. So global health, you know, when you see the world as a globe and as one piece, then yeah, it's global health, and we recognize that.
Wow, lots of integration here. You're using all your skill sets for sure. You talk a little bit about when you got back to the U.S., then you applied to NASA and thousands of applications. Can you talk a little bit about that process and the training that you received at NASA and what it was like on the encounter?
Oh, that's a whole bunch of them.
I know. Wherever you want to go with it, it's fine.
Let's see, where do I start? So I applied in 1985. My application went in 85. I had just gotten in, I think it was January of 86, I'd gotten the thing saying that to start filling out security clearance forms, and that meant, I found out later that meant that they were probably getting ready to interview me. The Challenger accident happened. And so they put that selection process on hold. They reopened it in the fall, and so I was interviewed in 87, in the January of 87. I thought, no matter what, it's just really cool, because you know what they do for the interviews? So they only interview, I think they interviewed 100 out of the 2,000 applicants, qualified applicants. they bring you down to Johnson Space Center in groups. You get to spend a week at Johnson, you know, learning what astronauts do. Also, every exam I think that I had ever ordered on a patient was ordered on me. So there was a little revenge in that, right? But it was just really neat because I thought, if nothing else, I mean, I just got to see the inside part of Johnson and talk to all these different astronauts and folks and blah, 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 blah. And I was notified one day when I was sitting at my desk. Well, I just actually come in from seeing a patient where I was working in a clinic and told that I should come down. I sort of wrote about all of this in this book, Find Where the Wind Goes. I sort of described the story in detail about how it happened. But it was kind of neat. Get down to Houston, they give you 2 months to close up, and you get down. I think I was notified in June. I had to be there in August. And got to Houston. Of course you say yes, and of course you figure out how to do it in 2 months. You don't start like, I don't know if I can make it to Texas in 2 months. You go. So I got down there, and so we had 15 people, and they came from different disciplines. It turns out I was the only one who had not been at NASA before or who was not in the military. Nice. And we had people who ranged from, you know, astrophysicists to, you know, a lot of Top Gun pilots and Top Gun, not just pilots, but Top Gun teachers. They taught the Top Gun students, right? Those are kind of the guys who were in the astronaut corps who are flying as pilots. And so they actually have to bring everyone to a baseline level of knowledge. So we did a lot of classwork. I was in airplanes and taking airplane classes with Top Gun pilot instructors. Okay, they were taking medical classes with me. Okay, so it was really kind of interesting, and and you have to do survival training and parachute training. That's another story. I didn't like heights, but I did it. You know, when I said about confidence, there's no way in hell I'm going to let these guys know I'm afraid of heights, right? You get to choose what you want to do, right? What would I rather be? No, I'm not going to let them know. Then I found out some of the pilots don't like heights. They would like say stuff, why would you jump out of a perfectly good airplane? It's like makes no sense. You don't understand people don't parachute training. But so it was really very interesting. And then you learn all the pieces of the shuttle. You learn about orbital dynamics, all of those kinds of things. It's just such a wide range of things. Training includes things like photography, because all the pictures that you see from up there are taken by who? Astronauts. Right? So you learn all of those kinds. So it's just a wide range of activities, which is really cool. And one of the great things about being in the astronaut corps is it's very physical and it's very mental. So astronauts are not Olympic athletes, but you have to be physiologically healthy, right? So it was really very, very exciting. And my mission was done with the Japanese Space Agency, which meant that I spent a lot of time in Japan because it was a joint mission. It was called Space Lab Japan. But I also spent a lot of times at Ames Research Center because we had some really interesting life sciences experiments like frog embryology, sort of to find out whether or not embryogenesis happens normally in space. It was kind of interesting because we assumed it wouldn't, and it did. And in fact, but that's another story. Let me finish going through it. So it was pretty exciting. Did a lot of tests on ourselves, how the human heart, how the human body adapts to weightlessness. So it was really thrilling. It was just really exciting.
You just mentioned the physiological, resilience that you must have as an astronaut. Can you talk a little bit about the mental health and that resilience?
I don't know if I said physiologically normal.
Okay.
And you're hoping that, and the reason why they want you physiologically normal is because you're putting this physiology in an abnormal environment at a point in time that you really don't know the parameters where it works, and you want to make sure that you can decrease the predictable adverse events, right? Once they get you trained up, so you can't come in with hypertension, but if you develop hypertension while you're in the astronaut corps, of course they treat you and stuff because it's been too much time and energy and money, and you can navigate it and of course get people down to normal. I think there is They do psychological tests. They try to test to keep out people who are blatantly psychotic or other issues or sociopathic and thing like that. So it's not a testing for, previously it was not a testing for necessarily people who are in great teamwork and stuff. You assume that people are in teamwork and you figure it out, but they wanted to keep out, you know, any blatant things. I think that the testing, a lot of the work that they're doing now has evolved since that time. You know, for me, I figure I could, you know, I can hang out with anybody for any period of time. If I want to go up into space, you're not going to rock my boat and keep me from going up if they get selected. It's like, you know, and I'm going to do my job and do my work no matter whatever happens. And I've had that experience base. And I think one of the reasons they look for people who are operational is that. And that is not to say that, you know, I'll answer this question really quickly. The astronaut corps was a microcosm in some ways of the United States, and NASA was. And so you had the range of people.
Yeah, exactly.
Could you tell us a little more about the 100-year Starship project that you're working on and what you hope to accomplish?
So years after, so we skipped a bunch of time. I left NASA. But over that time, I had worked on a lot of different things in environmental studies and, you know, started a science camp, other things. So DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, which is the premier research part of the Defense Department. One person who was a little bit of a outlier, he wanted to push on innovation, felt that we were sort of stagnating a bit in the US in terms of new and really revolutionary things, and was caught by the idea that, you know, during the Apollo era, when we were trying to go to the moon and we were first starting in space, we gained so much across the range of technologies and systems and capabilities that he thought, well, how do we do something else? So the idea of how do you go to interstellar, human journey to interstellar would be that same kind of a task. I'll tell you really quickly why it's not like going to Mars, because Mars would be it, and I would have, you know, hung around at NASA, we're going to Mars. But the reason it's not that is because we had landed on Mars when I was a kid. Right? As some of you all remember, there was Viking and all of those kinds of things that had landed on Mars. We knew Mars' address. We had been there a bunch of times. So it's not the same engineering challenge. When you talk about going to interstellar, you're talking about Voyager, the probe that just left our solar system that's been traveling at 37,000 miles per hour since 1977. It's just left our solar system. It would take Voyager 50,000 years to get to our closest neighboring star. So the range of things is completely different. The energy, the speed, the self-sufficiency that you have to have, the ability to course correct, your knowledge, your knowledge base in terms of microbiome and human behavior and things, but not just that in terms of going out, but also how do you challenge or channel the resources of the world so that you get a return on this, you know. And so when I was looking at it, I said, I know how to do this. And it wasn't about me knowing how to do interstellar, but how to create an organization that could help foster it. No one organization can do it, no one country can do it, but perhaps you can foster the environment that would allow these kinds of major projects, these kinds of things to happen. So the name of our proposal that won was An Inclusive, Audacious Journey Transforms Life Here on Earth and Beyond. And one of the first people that I recruited to working with me was a woman who was on a board of directors with me who was a marketing specialist, right? Why? Because you had to tell the story. At that time, you know, space has sort of been in everybody's eye right now, but at that time, it wasn't. So how do you start telling the story? And I should tell you, one of our first taglines as we've started to put this together, we had a number of different people. We had the folks who just were interested in, you know, warp drive and warp engines and rockets, and then we had people who were interested in from the love of and the storytelling, and so we were marrying this range of folks together. We even had, at one point in time, a professor who worked at the University of Rhode Island, Carl Espelon, who is in design, who heard me talking about 100-Year Starship and said, we need to talk about clothing. I'll just tell you, when I had him speak, you know, the folks with the rocket engines and the warp drive, they're like, "Man, you losing your mind? How you having somebody here talking about design?" He started talking about designs in such a way that clothing is identity. Clothing serves a purpose of keeping people warm. There's all these things, and on top of that, if you take up clothes the way we do now in space station, you'll never be able to do it because you could not take up enough. So we have to change what we do. So with clothing, so that's the reason inclusive was the first term, right? Because I don't know these things, but if you include people from a range of disciplines, you know, and yes, ethnicity, gender, and geography, then you get a much fuller, richer picture. So when I go back to all of this, I want to say that one of our first taglines was "Space isn't just for rocket scientists and billionaires." Because we want to include, I'm just saying this is in 2012. We were saying that. Space isn't just for rocket scientists and billionaires. And I think it becomes even more important today. We do things from having public symposia where we bring everybody together to deep subject matter experts creating new disciplines, which we call crucibles. And our first one was a virtual human, this is really fun. It was held in a castle in Graz, Austria. And the reason why we wanted to do that is where people couldn't call out, they couldn't go away, we had them trapped. But we had people from, you know, proteomics, genomics, you know, all the way to, you know, quantum computing, to really understand how do you model a health infrastructure that you can take with you, because you won't be able to rely on the health infrastructure here on Earth if you go deep space. And so we came up with a lot of different things. So that's the range of things. We actually started a project also called Look Up, because one of the pieces is to connect people with space, right? People love space, so we started a project called Look Up. And it was to, one day around the world, to galvanize everyone to look up and record what they think, see, hear, feel, dream, fear, through video, pictures, audio, text, and we tagged it to a globe that people could look at, and they could spin it around, so it was time tagged, geospatially tagged, so you could see what somebody on the other side of the world was seeing at the same time, what they were thinking, what they were feeling. And we made it free, and it's still up and available. We have to do additional things with it, but that's what we did. So trying to make sure that we, you know, connect the pieces, so it's not just one thing, right? And we can't do everything, and you know, I think we had something to do with, you've probably seen a proliferation of folks talking about interstellar. The first thing I had to do was keep it from being woo-woo. That is a technical term, don't laugh. To keep it from being woo-woo, because interstellar space, human interstellar space, was not something that you spoke about if you were a reasonable person. If you were a reasonable rocket scientist, you didn't talk about human interstellar, because we know that that's too big. So that's the reason why marrying it to life here on Earth and understanding that we have to connect it every step of the way was really important. But I had to go around and do that. We had to create a different kind of environment that said, this is not kooky. We can talk about it. That we believe pursuing an extraordinary tomorrow creates a better world today. It's what we do that you know, carries us along.
Just to go off of that, so I'm assuming you've seen the movie Interstellar, right?
Yes.
So one of my favorite movies personally, but I was just wondering, that's the first thing I think of when I think of space. So I'm just wondering.
Interstellar?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So how realistically do you think that movie portrays space and NASA and just interstellar travel in general?
So I'll tell you, one of my favorite space movies is, and I'll get back to Interstellar. Oh shoot, I just forgot. Sunshine. Was it Sunshine? Sunshine, and it was a Danny Boyle movie. It didn't get a lot of play. It was about a crew going toward the sun to sort of reignite it. You really didn't know what the time frame was, but I thought the operational piece within that, for the most part, was really interesting. I thought that was really good. Interstellar. So Kip Thorne, who was the physicist, he was the science consultant. They did an incredible job with relativistic physics. Okay, they did an incredible job. I don't know how well they explained it, but just in terms of demonstrating and stuff like that, they did an incredible job with it. But I found a lot of the other pieces of Interstellar drove me bonkers. So this is where, you know, sometimes people don't include everybody that they need to. Remember, the plot of Interstellar was the reason why we had to go through this black hole and find another place to live is because we couldn't grow food on Earth anymore. Yet, you see them driving through lush mountainsides. Right? Do you remember this scene? It was like all green everywhere. They had all kinds of trees. Well, you can't grow corn, but there's a lot of other stuff you can eat. If those trees are out there growing, you got something, right? I mean, there was just like the biology, just like I couldn't suspend disbelief long enough because I'm seeing these, I see them driving through cornfields, chasing a drone, and you know, if you can't eat, you're gonna drive through your cornfield and tear it up, chasing a drone. I mean, there were so many things, and then we're to believe that NASA can design all these structures, they can have a base near Jupiter and all of that, but they got 3 astronauts, and they have to go, was it McConaughey who they had to go find in order to fly, but they only got 3 astronauts, and none of them have the wherewithal to be able to do this. You know, this is a little too much. I think, and you know, it was visually beautifully stunning. Yeah. And it had a really, like, I think that, again, the relativistic physics was really interesting the whole time, the Tesseract stuff. And, you know, I thought one of the really cool lines was that, you know, love could defy all of that and you could create that connectivity. I thought that was really wonderful. But then they had to have Anne Hathaway blubbering and breaking down. One of my favorite actresses, one of my absolute favorite people, right? I'm like, why are you doing this to me? You can't keep doing this to me. Oh. But what was about Interstellar? I'm sorry. No, I love the picture. I mean, I did like it, but I didn't think they did a good job connecting the pieces because I think they were left, you know, to think that you could have a station at Jupiter, but have 3 astronauts on Earth who couldn't do anything just doesn't make any sense. You know, you can create the plot line in different ways. I'll tell you some of my favorite sites. Can I do this? Arrival. I liked the movie Arrival because it was an incredible science where it talks about time isn't linear and that you have other beings that see time in a different way. I thought that was really cool. Sunshine. Let me see. You know, my favorite of all time is the original The Day the Earth Stood Still. The original one, Michael Rene was 56, 57 it was actually made because it talked about our evolution as a species on Earth and the connection was very different. So there are some really interesting movies out there. Gravity could have been good, but again, they got carried away and Sandra Bullock had to channel George Clooney's ghost to make it.
Oh, yeah. That's right. Just one last question.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. No, give me something I can be real. Why did you like Interstellar?
I just thought it was cool. It was a very beautiful movie. I mean, it was moving for me personally, but I didn't know how accurate all the space travel component of it was, so I was just curious.
It was beautiful, but what I really do, the reason why I bring up the whole microbiome, because very often in space they brush over life sciences, and life sciences is probably one of the most difficult things to do, right? Which is why you have so many people wanting, you know, saying we should just send probes without people on board. You have so many scientists saying that because the life sciences piece is one of the most difficult pieces, and I thought that they did a real disservice to the life sciences.
I've been told we need to wrap things up.
Okay.
I have one last question. I really wanted to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about the science camps that you've done. You've had the advantage of being influenced very positively by, you know, your parents and your mom, you know, making you make sure that you're reading all these different things. And tell us about the opportunity that you've provided through these summer camps.
So the first thing I did when I left NASA was start the Earth We Share International Science Camps. And the idea was, what was the most important thing you could get from science? To me, it was critical thinking and problem-solving skills. And, you know, and using your knowledge and having, not asking the question, what does this have to do with me? So we designed a curriculum where students were tasked to solve a global dilemma in teams. So like predict the hot public stocks of year 2030. This was back in 1994. Design the world's perfect house. How many people can the earth hold? And we just gave them that as their topic. And then we taught them how to think about problems, that you have to ask questions first. Don't try to answer the questions when you're asking. Just ask all the questions you can think about. Ask them in different categories, then start to search through the questions to see the relevancy. And as you're working in teams, put this together. Then go out and do the research. So it's an iterative process. And then and then at the end, you have to communicate your ideas to God and everybody. We chose 12 to 16-year-olds because that's the time at which people start to fall out of science in terms of saying it's something they want to do. And it's a time where humans have superpowers that are incredible, right? Their motivation, what they're learning, their energy, and we wanted to engage them in that. And so it turned out really well because we'd have students were really excited about it because they worked in teams. The way we set stuff up, you couldn't sit on the sidelines. But the real underlying part of that was to give teachers an opportunity to learn how to do experiential education during a time where it was very punitive to do different things, right? So folks would tell teachers, y'all need to do something new and creative. Yet at the same time, you're being graded on evaluated on how well students do in a test, so you don't want to deviate from something. And you may not feel comfortable guiding folks through things that you're not the expert about. So that's what the camps were about, was really to create this curriculum, to test it, and to train teachers and give them an opportunity. So it was sort of multi-layered, and we were really excited about it. We were able to do it. It was a 4-week residential program at different places for 5 years. We probably did 6 or 7 like that. Then we also did one-day camps in different places because it's really, you can solve a problem and work on a problem in different ways if you know your resources. And then we did a program with Los Angeles Unified School District for 4 years where we trained middle school teachers. We trained worked with over 4,000 students, over 200 teachers. And it was really just sort of making people comfortable with experiential education. In fact, that's how humans learn, right? We learn our best through experience. So how do you create those experiences in the classroom? How do you make science, or keep science relevant in people's minds to their lives?
That's fascinating, and actually that is so in line with the curriculum here, the disputed question. I think that just it's integrating. We have to close this. I think we could talk with Dr. Jemison for hours. This is really fascinating and so inspiring. Thank you so much. Thank you. And also, we look forward to Dr. Jemison's address at tomorrow's commencement ceremony and to formally welcome you to the Fryer family with an honorary degree tomorrow.
Thank you.
And also thank you to Eliana, who's got a great career ahead of her. Okay, we can continue on with the journey today, and everyone have a terrific day. Thank you.